All right. Trump cuts millions in grants for predominantly Black institutions, divert funds to HBCUs. It sounds like an oxymoron, but it is to a certain degree. So it says here the Trump administration has diverted hundreds of millions of dollars away from minority serving institutions, MSIs, which include predominantly Black institutions, PBIs, of higher learning, to increase funding for historical Black colleges and universities. While the move is seemingly great for HBCUs, MSI designated colleges and universities that educate millions of Black, Hispanic, and Asian and Native Americans will lose critical funding. Last week, Education Secretary Linda McMahon announced the Department of Education was cutting $350 million in grants to MCI, citing that they met racial and ethnic quotas. The Trump administration has federally banned all programs it considers to be DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and has threatened to withhold any federal dollars for schools that do not comply with anti-DEI executive order signed by President Donald Trump.
Translation, the old parable. You can feed a man a fish or teach him to fish so he can feed himself. Historical Black colleges and universities have 120, 140, 150-year history of delivering education in an effective fashion. The HBCUs have 120, 160, 140-year long history of delivering excellent education that prepares people to work in modern society at a certain level. Now, that is important, and these HBCUs have been integrated, and you'll see that if you visit one of their campuses. Now, the other entities that are being cut back on actually do get into more propaganda than they get into teaching what is functional. So there's been a problem going on with HBCUs, and that is transferred to a great extent to the other entities, and that is just outright corruption, greed, and wrongdoing that has diminished the reach out of these institutions in a fashion that is not trying to deliver quotas, but trying to deliver general education. There is a difference between affirmative action and anything else trying to reach a quota, which under American law has been long forbidden in most circumstances, and delivering a fair opportunity, which is to be promoted. So that's what we have here. So we have under the Biden-Harris administration a minuscule amount going to HBCUs, but now Trump and his administration is talking about $550 million, which is the most that has gone to HBCUs since the Johnson administration 55 years ago.
Now, just want to give a couple of examples of the PBIs, predominantly Black institutions and colleges, where Black population of at least 50% of at least 1,000 undergraduate students, such as CUNY Medgar Evers College, CUNY York College, Chicago State University, Auburn University at Montgomery, and Clayton State University. PBIs like Hispanic serving institutions and other minority serving institutions receive grants authorized by Congress for financial assistance. So those are the schools that are having their funding cut. Also, the Education Department said the new discretionary funding will be a one-time 48% increase for HBCUs. President Trump has long touted his support for HBCUs, though critics often point out that the $250 million a year for HBCUs during his first term was a result of Congress and not the White House. President Joe Biden, during his term office, invested a record, they're saying, $17 billion towards HBCUs. I'm going to fact check that because that is not true. Predominantly Black institution PBIs are colleges and universities with a Black population of at least 50% of at least 1,000 undergraduate students. Examples of PBIs include CUNY, Medgar Evers College, York College, Chicago State University, Auburn University of Montgomery, and Clayton State University. PBIs like Hispanic serving institutions and other minority serving institutions receive grants authorized by Congress for financial assistance. Now, the education department said a new discretionary funding would be a one-time 48% increase for HBCUs. The President Trump has long touted his support for HBCUs, though critics often point out that the 250 million a year for HBCUs during his first term was a result of Congress, and note that and not the White House. President Joe Biden, during his term office, invested $17 billion towards HBCUs. Now, I don't think that is accurate. I don't think the Biden.
That's not accurate. That is no way, no how accurate.
Right. So we all can fact check that. So anyway, but this 48% is a one time. However, the continual annual financial investment with HBCUs will continue. It's just that other universities that cater more towards minorities will be cut. And I think also he is doing that, of course, the anti-DEI. And when we talk about illegal migrants that were getting grants and funding and money to go to those minority institutions, because those minority institutions and predominantly minority institutions where the funding is being cut are in blue sanctuary cities.
Yeah, well, basically, are you conducting a general collegiate education on the premises, or are you doing DEI on the premises where it's just your hustle so that you get an opportunity to tap into federal funds for your own purposes?
Correct. So I want to move on to California. The University of California students, professors, and staff sue the Trump administration. The Trump administration is using civil rights laws to wage a campaign against the University of California in an attempt to curtail academic freedom and undermine free speech, according to the lawsuit filed Tuesday by faculty, staff, student organizations, and every labor union representing UC workers. The lawsuit comes weeks after the Trump administration fined the University of California, Los Angeles $1.2 billion and froze research funding after accusing the school of allowing anti-Semitism on campus and other civil rights violation. It was the first public university to be targeted with a widespread funding freeze. The administration has frozen or paused federal funding over similar allegations against elite private colleges, including Harvard, Brown, and Columbia.
Well, I can speak. I went to undergrad and got a political science degree from that university, UCLA, and a law degree or a doctorate of law from that university, UCLA. Played football for them for a brief while. Did some other things there. Helped set up one of the first affirmative action programs in the United States there in the mid 60s, which was devoted toward fair and effective opportunities to acquire a higher education that would promote fallout to the impacted communities. It wasn't about quotas. But some of the things that I am informed are going on around there, frankly, disgust me, and they need to be cut back because it is becoming an ideological cesspool to advance the causes of the far left rather than education. On the big scale, what used to be a systemic promotion of free speech and an abundance of ideas, including those that were repugnant to a large number of the students who attended at any given point. Now we have a pretty uniform ideological presentation that is basically to the far left, well, that way on screen. But in any event, it's really disgusting what's being done at UCLA's campus and in other locations, University of California system that needs to be straightened out. As I said earlier, some X-Lax or a huge dollop of castor oil needs to be dispensed to flush this contagion, this constipation out of the system so it gets back to being a great institution again, where all sides, points of views, and aspects of one thing or another get investigated and presented to the students so that they can learn to develop wisdom, discernment, analysis, shall we say, objectivity, rationality, logic, and reason when they assess certain things they may be confronted with in life.
Mm-hmm. And we have another school, another update. Harvard ends decades old diversity program that encouraged minority students to apply. Harvard University quietly ended a program, the Undergraduate Minority Recruitment Program, in May, whose purpose was to encourage minority students to learn more and help them apply to prestigious institution in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Founded in 1971, the UMRP helped aspirational students in middle and high school with the university application process. To do this, the program employed counselors who address questions from prospective students about life at the school and about the application process. According to the Crimson, as of 2012, 75 to 90% of all minority students who have matriculated through Harvard has some interaction with UMRP. Now, the program officially.
I'm aware of when they set it up because we discussed that at some length. And it makes up for the fact that today you have too much attention paid to far leftist ideology in public institutions that cuts off the students' access and acquisition of those things that would allow him or her to matriculate in a great institution of higher learning. They get ideologically propagandized rather than taught to be critical, analytical, reasonable, rational, logical, objective, and detached when they look at things. That's no longer the case. Back when this program was set up, others around the country were anticipated, and what that was just there was a real problem back then. It had to do with minority students being channeled into vocational fields rather than promoted when it comes to academia because minorities, whether they're Asian, black, white, brown, red, yellow, would be happier working with their hands and with their minds. So there were programs that fed into what was trying to get into college in the 1970s that had crippled a lot of students because they got channeled into gardening, home ec, they got channeled into woodworking, carpentry, and stuff like that. You can earn a living with that, but it cut out access to programs that led to being doctors, lawyers, businessmen, scientists, engineers, mathematicians, and such like, who would actually have something to do with directing society.
Mm-hmm. Well, Harvard, like many institutions of higher learning in the United States, has been under increased scrutiny from the Trump administration to end programs that could be tagged as DEI base. In 2023, Supreme Court ruling also banned the use of race-based admission practices for schools, securing federal funding, effectively ending affirmative action on college campuses. Universities with diversity goals were forced to find new ways to find higher quality candidates in order to reach university objectives for all forms of diversity, often turning to recruitment programs that center on other metrics that allow for a diverse student body.
UCLA tried to convince me some years ago to participate in fundraising so that they could get qualified Black students or African American students to attend UCLA. Now, this is in the country's largest state. They claim there weren't a sufficient number of qualified Black students to bring into UCLA, and they'd had the deplorable condition of the year before, where you almost had 100,000 students and 90-some thousand at the time. They admitted exactly one Black freshman. So that was disgusting. That was the fewest amount UCLA had admitted since the 1920s, and this was in the 21st century. I refused and castigated them for their insane policies. Now, there is a DEI thing that is going on, but it's called advanced placement. See, what happens when you have an advanced placement situation? A B is counted as 5.0 rather than 3.0, and an A is counted as 6.0 instead of 4.0. So you have students who go to a school, say Beverly Hills High School, that has plenty of advanced placement courses where they can come up with a grade point average where they get B's, C's, and some A's, and they get a higher GPA than some student that went to, say, Jordan in LA, which was mostly all Black at the time, and they get a perfect straight A average. They won't have anything above 4.0, and they get defeated by somebody by 5.1. Meanwhile, if you were in a school that has what they call an advanced placement track, they added a whole point on there. So theoretically, you could get way up into fives if you got in an advanced placement track, because whatever your GPA was when they calculated it using 5.0 for B's and 6.0 for A's, you got another extra point added, which was very discriminatory, and it's a form of DEI, but in reverse, that needs to be arrested and corrected. But it still exists in California, of course, being the hypocritical mess that it is, won't do anything about correcting it. By the way, there's one other thing too. The California Constitution could have stopped all of this nonsense 50 some years ago. When they passed the California Constitution in 1851, when it joined the Union, this is 10 years before the Civil War, it said, we create the University of California, not just for educational excellence, but to develop leadership. It elaborated that some of our Chinese citizens are subject to basically being gangstered by tongs. Some of our Hispanic citizens and residents are subject to being run by gangs. It said our colored brethren who live in California, and this was 10 years before the Civil War started, are subject to some horrid conditions, but they need leadership in their community. So these various and sundry communities should be promoted in their admission, not just for academic purposes, but for developing leadership, which will profit the state. And they did not even bring that up when they dealt with the Bakke situation, which was a collaboration with some Boule Negroes who hadn't been doing anything but going to frat and sorority parties and generally getting high and having a good time instead of working on their grades.